Welcome to the verse-by-verse study of the book of Proverbs. We'll begin chapter 11 today, starting with verse 1. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. Again, we have two contrasting statements separated by that but. Two contrasting behaviors, two contrasting choices in life. First, recall that these Proverbs were written around 650 BC, which is well before the use of government-minted coins or currency. So during these times, people mostly used bartering, trading crops for services and services for crops. And occasionally they would trade goods for precious metals like gold and silvers, and these needed to be weighed. So buyers and sellers had their own scales to measure the weight of this precious metal. These scales used different size pre-weighed measuring stones as counterweights. A dishonest person would actually have two sets of measuring stones. One would be slightly heavier and one would be slightly lighter, depending on whether he was buying or selling. Many saw this practice as being clever, shrewd, smart business, especially when it was against, say, a Samaritan. But God clearly says that he detests dishonesty. The Hebrew word detest means an abomination, a defilement. Dishonesty literally pollutes our heart. It weakens our character and brings dishonor, and it's a slippery slope that leads to greater dishonesty. So using these honest scales is exactly the opposite. It builds character. It makes a habit of clean living, a life that is pure without guilt. And it brings God delight, which brings his blessings. Next in verse 2, when pride comes, there comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. Pride is a major theme, a major warning throughout the book of Proverbs, as is humility, because humility is the beginning of that wisdom. Proverbs focuses on pride because it is so destructive. It is the primary gateway to sin. As we shall see in chapter 16, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. So what is biblical pride? Simply believing that you are better, more superior than someone else. You're being self-absorbed, self-centered, always comparing yourself to others. We become hard-hearted, judgmental. We don't listen, and we're blinded and insensitive to those around us, and especially to God. The psalmist said, "In his pride, the wicked man does not seek him." There's no room for God. In all his schemes, there is no God. So what is the biblical definition of humility? It's the opposite of pride. It means to have an open heart, to humble ourselves, to listen. I love what C.S. Lewis said. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less often. Which means that we're less self-centered, self-absorbed. We're more sensitive to folks around us. Next in verse 3, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. To be guided by integrity means that we're guided by God's wisdom. His moral behavior becomes right and wrong. This word integrity is a very interesting Hebrew word. It means wholeness. It is the opposite of being broken. The person of integrity is someone that is upright, secure, solid, without guilt, without anxiety, without cracks, without being broken. As opposed to those that reject God's wisdom, they walk in duplicity, which means they walk without a moral compass. They're untrustworthy, dishonest to others, and dishonest to even themselves. There is no right or wrong. It is a life full of ever-changing compromises and deception. It is a sad life, a life without purpose, and a life without hope. Next, again, a straightforward biblical fact. Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, in the day of judgment. But righteousness delivers us from death. Again, we see a reminder that speaks to the New Testament that wealth may buy temporary pleasure and perhaps power, but it will be worthless in the day of judgment. Only the righteousness of Christ will deliver us. In fact, verse 5 says, the righteousness of the blameless, of those that follow God's wisdom, make their paths straight, but the wicked are brought down by their own doing, by their own wickedness. Again, we have the righteous compared to the unrighteous. We have the righteous, those who are following God's wisdom. They walk a straight rather than a crooked path. A crooked path means a path that's full of detours and potholes, of anxiety, drama, doubt, unrest, all created by our bad decisions and our, quote, bad attitude, unquote. Next, we have the righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the unfaithful are trapped. Trapped by what? By evil desires of their heart. Again, we see this consistent theme of choice. A life that is upright, just, secure, full of integrity, without shame and guilt. Or a life that is full of regrets, that is being trapped by guilt. A life that is addicted to sin and its consequences. They're trapped to sin and its consequences. Hopes placed in mortals, meaning humans, die with them. All the promise of their power comes to nothing. Again, we have a warning that hope and faith and a life invested solely in man's power, man's promises, man's philosophies will eventually die and only bring us disappointment. But faith in God never disappoints. The righteous person is rescued from trouble, and it falls on the wicked instead. Now, as a reminder, to follow God in his wisdom does not mean we won't have challenges, tribulations, Christ said. But it does mean we can face those challenges with peace in our heart and confidence that a wise, loving God will always be at our side. And he is sovereign over the outcome. Equally, we can be confident that the promise that those that choose sin will always experience the consequences of those sin. With their mouths, the godless destroy their neighbors, but through knowledge, the righteous escape. Again, the author compares the wicked with the wise. A consistent trait of the wicked is their words harm others. Lies, slander, gossip, half-truths. This Hebrew word again for destroy means to defile or to pollute. They defile others' reputation, and in the process they defile themselves. Yet the righteous escape this flesh temptation by arming themselves and their mouth with God's wisdom. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. When the wicked perish, there are shouts of joy. This verse speaks of a general truth, that in almost all societies, there is a rejoicing when a true good guy, a true good gal, wins and the bully loses. C.S. Lewis called this an ordained moral law. That we have this innate desire that God put in our DNA that we want righteousness to prevail. Next we have through the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted, but By the mouth of the wicked it is destroyed. Again, it's a general truth that a viable, livable, sustainable community is built by hardworking, honest citizens. But all it takes to destroy that community, that city, is corrupt leadership. Sustained graft, greed, bribes, deceit, distrust, favoritism, laziness, moral decay pollutes and bankrupts any community. Next we have whoever derides, meaning to verbally express hate to basically their neighbor, has no sense. But the one who has understanding, meaning God's wisdom, manages their tongue. Again, we have a warning against this unbridled, abusive tongue. This speaking about others negatively that harms them. Sometimes it's on purpose. Sometimes it's just foolish, as we see here, which is a lack of sense. But either way, it's insensitive. They run their mouth and cause damage, again, to themselves and to others. Proverbs repeatedly warns us about the quality and the quantity of our words, that the tongue can be so powerfully positive or so tremendously evil, as noted in the next verse. A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret. The unruled tongue can break a relationship. A tongue can in a few seconds destroy trust between two people that took years to build. It can be destroyed in literally seconds because of that unmanaged tongue. This word for gossip in Hebrew means a storyteller. Some folks just want to be the center of attention, to be a storyteller, with little concern to the damage that it causes themselves and to others. It is pure selfishness. Yet a hallmark of a person following God's wisdom is they can be trusted. And their words are words of encouragement and of advice that is based solely on God's wisdom, which is the point of the last verse 14 that we'll deal with today. Let's take a look. 4, lack of guidance. A nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. One of the greatest and most rare qualities of an effective leader is humility. Humility means the leader genuinely seeks and listens to the guidance of various voices from various sources. It says many. They do not allow their emotional pride and their large ego to get in the way of making truly informed decisions. They have the courage and the security to admit they don't have all the answers. They listen more than they talk. That's a leader. And they encourage those with different opinions to speak. And then they rely on God's discernment to choose the right path for that nation, for that business, or for that family. We shall close there. Pick it up next week with verse 15. Until then, may God bless you. Bless your family with both grace and peace. Aloha.